Good afternoon and welcome back to the One Celtic Fans View. There's absolutely devastating news for Celtic fans this afternoon after being sent off on Tuesday evening in Madrid against Atletico Madrid. Daizen Maeda is now facing 6 weeks out with a knee injury. Remember, it was just back in the summer that we sold off 3 first-team players in Carl Starfelt, Jota and Aaron Moy. We have now been without Rio Hatate, which would make that a 4th first-team player that we're missing from last season. And now we are without the one and only Daizen Maeda. Daizen Maeda, who has been absolutely phenomenal this season. He has been Mr. Duracell himself. He's been all over the pitch and he's done absolutely fantastic. The fact that Daizen faces 6 weeks out after suffering a knee injury during the challenge that earned him that dubious red card in Atletico Madrid is absolutely devastating for the player and Celtic. Maeda initially was booked for a 50-50 with the player, and the yellow card was obviously upgraded after VAR reviewed. He left his foot in, but you never thought that he was going to come off worse injured. Brendan Rodgers said that Daizen will probably be about 6 weeks out with injury from the challenge. He strained his knee ligament when he came off, and he just knocked the player on the foot. If he was in a stronger challenge, he would probably have had a worse injury. The clash of feet just opened up his knee ligament. Said Brendan Rodgers. It's a big shame for us because he's been brilliant since I came here, said Brendan Rodgers. It's been a big loss because his attitude, his mentality going into the game has been superb, said Brendan Rodgers, and he initiates pressure for us at the top end of the pitch. It's a real shame, says Brendan Rodgers. He's been like a machine since I came to Celtic. Watching him before I arrived and then coming here and seeing what he does every day in training and in the games is incredible. He hasn't had too many knocks in his career. The fact that he's now out for 6 weeks is difficult for Celtic, but as he always says, Brendan Rodgers, it's now an opportunity for someone else to come in and play. The injury blow compounded Rodgers' frustration and the decision to send Maeda off in the 6-0 Champions League defeat. And when you see the fact that it was a kind of 50-50 tackle and he's now come off worse with a long-term injury. You only have to assess the incident, said Brendan Rodgers. Everyone could see that there was no real intention. He was just overstretched and both players clashed feet. The irony is, as soon as the red card went up, the player got off the floor. Well, that's how they play in Europe. We all know that, Brendan, and that's how they play. Rodgers remains calm about the nature given Maeda's red card, although during the game, what can you say? But going to the weekend, I think it's devastating for everyone involved that Daizen is now out injured for a lengthy period of time. Who do we bring in? Tell me in the comments, who do we bring in now that Daizen is off and on a long-term injury? Who do you think that should come in on a more regular basis and play in Daizen's position? It's going to be a very hard one for the boss to take. Turnbull's obviously getting his chance. Will Turnbull come back into the team this weekend? I think there'll be massive changes against the team that are doing not too bad in the last couple of weeks, being Aberdeen. But let's face it, it is always a tough game against Aberdeen. They never do that well at Celtic Park, so let's just hope it's a high-scoring game and we can settle down before this international break. I am absolutely devastated with the news that Daizen is going to be out for a lengthy period of time. I think it's just one of those things. We always knew that injuries would be part of any season. Rodgers now goes on to Sunday's game and he said, for us, it's a continuation of fighting, running and working and developing the players. I'm fed up of this developing the players to have a belief at that level in the Champions League. It's not a case that we want to develop belief in the players. As Celtic fans, we just want players to come in that are slightly a bit more ready for that level. Anyway, the Champions League is over and done with for a few weeks. We get back to business. Matt O'Reilly, Brendan Rodgers was talking about him. He says, look, Matt O'Reilly 2 years ago was playing League One. Other young players like him, Liam Scales, are sampling it and thrived this year. But what you can't do is give them the experience that comes from being in that competition. It comes from adverse moments, and it was a bit of adversity. Adversity is not winning and losing 6-0. Cameron Carter-Vickers was asked about that in today's press conference. He was asked about how do you come back? How do we mentally come back from getting beat 6-0? And he says, well, you're angry about it for 24 hours. And then we forget about it and move on. I'm sorry, Cameron Carter-Vickers, but when you're at a club like Celtic, it is not acceptable to have that kind of scoreline. But we move on. We do move on, and we talk about Aberdeen. We talk about Aberdeen this weekend. We are doing a live at 6 p.m. Celtic part-time this evening. Come and have a talk about who you think will be in the team this weekend, because Brendan Rodgers has got a massive shout to make. There's now another player out with a long-term injury. We now have Daizen Maeda. Think about this just for a second. When you look back at the team last year, we now have Daizen Maeda, we have Rio Hatate, and we have Leo Labada out injured. Now that's 3 first-team players from last season. We sold Aaron Moy retired. We sold Jota and Carl Starfelt. That alone is 6 players from the first team that played so well last season. It is no wonder that we all feel that Brendan Rodgers has basically been having to go into this season with one arm tied behind his back, because we haven't brought in any type of quality. We've brought in project players. Brendan Rodgers has said that himself. He said, it's about managing the expectation. Well, I'm sorry, but we've managed expectation for the best part of 20 years as Celtic fans. There's papers and publications putting out the fact that, from Martin O'Neill to Gordon Strachan to Lenny to then Brendan Rodgers, and then every manager since then has not done very well in Europe. There's one common denominator, and it has to be the board. I'm sorry. There's one common denominator over the last 20 years that have overseen Celtic go through a very successful period on the pitch domestically, and we will all take that all day long. But there has to come one point in the game, in the board, at boardroom level, where they say, look, winning leagues might be fine for a lot of people, and winning trebles and everything, yes, it's fine, and by the record books, but Celtic as a club historically have always given themselves a little bit of romance in Europe, and we've not had that for a long time. And you can actually go back and say, look, 80s we were terrible also. 90s, we just forget about the 90s completely, because that was the nomad years. That was the complete nomad years when it comes to European football. Anyway, join us on the live tonight, and we'll talk about the game on Sunday. We'll talk about the game on Sunday. We'll try and get our team prediction, because let's face it, no one knows what team Brendan Rodgers is going to pick out for Sunday's game now. With not many people give themselves pass marks on Tuesday evening. It's which players he thinks is going to be up for the game against Aberdeen. And like it or not, there'll be another lot of changes as he manages the squad before it goes into the international break. I feel absolutely gutted for Daizen Maeda. Tell me what you think about his long-term injury and what effect that might have on the team. Roll up to the party, roll up to the party, roll up to